Staff Sergeant Butler. I came up with kind of like the Zoom call for monthly meetings to kind of get recruiters together, so that way we can kind of see what's going on out there, have somebody else to talk to, because I know a lot of times out there when we're in our zones, it feels like we're isolated in some areas, and some areas have a group recruiting office as well. So it's kind of a good way to share ideas and again, just show people that we're not alone. Today, I was able to talk with Tech Sergeant Neff as well as Senior Master Sergeant Taylor to come out here from the RSO to kind of give us a background on what they do.
Awesome. So Senior Master Sergeant Taylor, I am the Enlisted Accessions Branch Superintendent. So basically I am, lack of better words, the big mother ops chief for all of AFRS. Prior to my assignment up there, thought I knew what I was walking into, but that's really what it is. It's just a overglorified ops chief where you might see your guys' mission. Your ops team handles like job distro to the flights, bookings, all that stuff. We actually have two separate, and then you have your waivers and people checking policies, things like that. We actually have it separated into two offices. Job bank and enlisted accession standards fall under my scope. And then I have a third office out in BMT, which is the Master Sergeant Consalvo, where they're what we used to call recruiter police, but they're the last stop for a recruiter to talk to our applicant, fix paperwork, contracts, things like that. And so I'm really glad Sergeant Butler reached out to have us on, because there's a lot of things we're trying to do right for the field, and being able to create a forum where we can get your feedback, because I haven't put someone in quite a while. It's been many years. My challenges are not your challenges. And so what changes we are looking to create or push forward could be very different. What could be good for you guys, but you guys may not actually be good, and so forth. So that's a little bit about me. I'll go ahead and pass over to Tech Sergeant Neff so he can introduce himself. He's from the Enlisted Accession. They're from the Standards office.
Hey everyone, I'm Sergeant Neff. I am a Tier 2 Enlisted Standards NCO. I work in Enlisted Standards under Sergeant Taylor. There is one other individual in my office who's my boss, Master Sergeant Franco. So we are a 2-deep position, and we make up a lot of what goes on in the enlisted operations world. Whenever I first arrived at this position, my previous boss told me that my main job is to be the voice of the recruiter, because I am the freshest off the bag. I just came off my Tier 1. So I try to voice any and all concerns that a recruiter might have with what's going on up here. There's a lot of ideas in this hallway, and some of them are great and some of them aren't. And some of them means more work for the recruiters. Some of them don't make sense and it would be frustrating for recruiters. So that's usually where I try to step in and bring that voice and reason. So I'm constantly engaging with the field, making sure that I have a good pulse on what's going on out there. So that way I can advocate for you guys as much as possible. But I came out of Frederick, Maryland, where I did my Tier 1. Sergeant Taylor was my pro soup, and we were pretty successful out there. I think we had a pretty good thing going. We had an amazing flight chief that really rallied us all together, from a point of not being so great when we first got there to our last year, finishing out the year as top flight in AFRS. So I feel like we had a lot of really good practices. And I hope that I can share some of that experience with you all.
Thank you. Again, it's kind of like an open forum. We had the chat going in the bottom right as well, as people who just want to talk can talk freely as well. I kind of have a 30-minute slot for Senior Master Sergeant Taylor as well as Tech Sergeant Neff. I have one of the questions on here. I want Master Sergeant Griffin to ask his question though, if he's able to.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm on leave right now, but I guess my question would be, so I don't know if this deals with you guys exactly, but the SOPG is kind of like what we do everything off of, and all of our expectations get put off of the SOPG. However, I don't see any mention of the SOPG in any of the enlisted sessions AFIs. or anything like that, as well as like the SOPG is not even signed by anyone at all. So is there like a reason for that at all, or is this just like looking at it from like an outsider's perspective, like it just almost looks like a made up guidance thing almost?
Yeah, I can hit on that one. Sorry, Taylor. So the SOPG is that in of itself, it's procedural guidance. All right. And there's rules in the Air Force for procedural guidance. And that's what we have. That's what was signed off on by AATC because recruiting is such a rapidly changing environment. And I know all of you guys know that things are changing constantly, almost week to week, almost day to day. So there's no way that we can update an AFI, a DAFman, or whatever the case may be as often as we need to. So that's where the SOPG comes in. Now, the SOPG may not be signed, but is owned by the division chief, Colonel Turner. All right, that is his guidance. He's the one that signs off on all those changes. He's ultimately responsible for what happens in Air Force Recruiting Service operations. Now, the SOPG in it of itself is a collection of policy and guidance from all kinds of different regulations. And if you guys are at your computers right now and you got the SOPG up, towards the top of the document, there's a references section. And I'm going to scroll down real quick so I can tell you what page it's on. It starts on page 14, right? These are all the things that we pull all the information from. Not very much of the SOPG is proprietary just to the SOPG. It may be like the little finicky things like the AFRISS type stuff, but everything else is pulled from either a DODI, MEPCOM regulation, the DAFMAN 36-2032, which is our Air Force recruiting policy. That's what a lot of it derives from. And then all of recruiting stuff comes from Title 10, Chapter 30. And if you guys have never looked at that, I would encourage you just to go take a peek. There's a link to it in the SOPG, but you'll see a lot of just verbatim stuff from Title 10, and that trickles down and just makes its way into the SOPG for you all. So you have a nice one-stop shop for all the references that you need to do your job with. Does that answer your question, sir?
So I'll add really quick. So before it switched, before it was SOPG, it was PSDG, and then it was an AFRSI. And so back when it was an AFRSI, it was actually, I don't know if anyone's on the line, I'm sure maybe Chief Cone and a few others can remember, where very similar to where we have the guidance portal. We had one for specific, they were called PGMs, where basically anytime there was an update. So think of all the NOTAMs you've seen, is that the AFRSI was maybe changed every, I don't think it changed anytime I was on the bag that I remember. So I think that was like 5 or 6 years into recruiting service, that whatever was in the AFRSI did not change, and any changes came from a PGM that would get loaded into the portal, and we would have to use that. So when we're doing and screening for applicants and so forth, it's like you got to review the AFRSI, and then you had to go scroll through the PGMs to see like, okay, this one's from credit checks, this one's for soft books, this one's for, I don't know. It's just, it was so many different things. So when we went when AFRS decided to go this route, it actually made it easier for you guys to kind of have, because as you've seen, there's been like, I think 7 NOTAMs in the past month. This allows for us to update with current policy that's getting implemented and all over the place into one document, and help you guys as you guys move forward and getting people in Air Force.
Yeah, I think that basically answers it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. And to further your point, I mean, so my job is primarily getting calls and emails, like trying to decipher what the SOPG says, or, hey, we got this weird situation and it doesn't really fit what the SOPG says. A lot of times I'm not even opening up the SOPG. I've kind of gotten to the point where I know where the reference is, and so I just go straight to the source. And so if you guys want to get real smart real quick, I would encourage you guys to do the same. If somebody's asking you a MEPs question and you're looking at the SOPG, I would encourage you to go to MEPCOM's website and pull up their list of regulations and see exactly what the 40-1 says, because sometimes we lose things in interpretation, and sometimes the answer is in the parent document. And you can get really, really smart that way, really quick. And it can make your lives a lot easier.
Okay, I kind of want to stay on this topic. Let's say that we have an idea of a change, right? And or an update. What's that process after we pass through everything? We already checked all those documents, and we submit it, and you guys like it. What do you do then?
So there is a formal way to route up requests. I've been here for a little over a year now, and I've only ever received a formal request one time. So we more go with the informal way, which is usually a phone call or email, like, hey, this doesn't make sense, or hey, I noticed that this is missing. Can you add this? And then we just take a quick note of it. So we have a working SOPG on Teams that all of the SMEs and AFRS headquarters are added to, so they can go in there and make changes as necessary. But every quarter we just compile all of those changes. We sit down, we make sure we link up with those SMEs to understand what the intent is. We check with any kind of outside agencies, making sure that, hey, is what we're doing legal? And then everything gets reviewed by our RSO leadership, primarily Chief Rawls, who's our RSO division superintendent. And then obviously Colonel Turner, who I said owns the SOPG.
So
Okay.
with the recent, I'm sure you guys saw, like I posted on, I'm trying to figure out what's the right mold with communication down to the lowest level, right? So when SOPG gets published, how do you guys know, or do you even know, did you even know you could make a change? Even AFRS from the AFRS legacy, it was static. You could not change anything. I don't even know if there was ever a change. I think the only change came when the SF86 increased questions and things like that, right? And so having to know, like, there is a way to make changes to AFRS, there's ways to make changes to SOPG. Before I came into this position, I heard nothing but gripes about the SOPG and how terribly written it is. And so then I was like, sweet, this is going to be a big rock of mine when I get up here. And I've only been up there since August, and it was crickets. And I was like, okay, everybody was ready to complain. I'm like, what's wrong with it? It's 300 pages. I can't comb through it and find everything wrong with it. I need you guys to like pick holes at it and then let me know. And so even when we did the SOPG rewrite, which we're hoping to publish relatively soon, we're a little behind, is that we didn't even hit every chapter. We specifically had to prioritize because there's like, I believe 12 chapters, and we only hit the EA ones because that's what, I don't need to refine the chaplain chapter, the gold bar chapter, things like that. So we only hit the main chapters and trying to make it a lot easier. But in that process, I was talking to SSgt Neff, and we definitely want to look at refining how do we accept, if maybe there's a simpler way to accept changes so that you guys can know you can submit things. And if you see things that make better sense for us to implement across the command. So I encourage hearing what you guys need us to change.
Yeah, and a lot of times those conversations, it's more, I don't understand why it's this way. Can we change it? And that leads into, you and I having a conversation about the why. Because a lot of times we just don't understand the why it says this. Why do I have to do it this way? And that's kind of the benefit of being up here, is we get that perspective. And I'm more than willing to take a phone call with anybody to share that perspective and hopefully alleviate some of that frustration. Because usually we end most of those phone calls like, wow, thanks. I didn't realize it was like that for a reason. I understand now. And that can make everybody's lives a lot easier.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. And that's another reason why I like this group. And I think we have the Teams going. Teams has been around for, I believe, a couple of years I've seen. And I just learned about it a few months ago. I think the communication is, again, one of the hardest things to capture, because we have text messaging, we have emails, we have Facebook, we have social media, other social media outlets, and then we have people just, word of mouth. And I think the word of mouth is probably the scariest thing that we have in recruiting. So I kind of like this. This is what the whole focus of this is, to cut these out into chapters, right, and promote them on Teams as well. Teams is hopefully going to be the one-stop shop to where everybody can kind of go to get like a whole breakdown in the process. So again, to keep on the topic of the SOPG changes, what's the quickest update you've seen? So let's say that somebody, you know, submitted an idea to you, everything was good, you liked it and you pushed it. What's the quickest timeline you've seen?
I mean, it kind of depends on how big the lift is. If it's changing up a paragraph because it doesn't make sense and your interpretation of it makes way more sense, and we should have obviously had that from the beginning, I'll go in there and make that change immediately. Now, you won't see it until the next release, but for like things like that, we don't really need outside approval. Now, if we're asking to change like an entire process up, then it's kind of a different ask. You know, do we need to make system changes to AFRISS? Do we need to get outside approval in order to do that? So it really depends on what it is that you're wanting exactly.
So when we did the SOPG rewrite, I'm pretty sure I was a pain in everybody's behind. I'm trying to not cuss this time around, because having been up there long enough, I kind of figured out what's my parameters, what's within my scope, right? And so when ideas were coming around on what can I make changes on the SOPG, I was like, that's not my lane. I can't fix that today. I want to leave the room at the end of the week where it's something that I can actually follow through on in my position in my office. And so, like, for example, the 2030 is not driven by AFRS, but it's something we put on the parking lot. We're like, let's make a list of things that we don't own that we do need to attack. But today, what can we implement today? And that's where Sergeant Neff said it. There's some things that we own that we can make changes to. And that sometimes, and again, I don't know where some of these, what's the word I'm looking for, barriers came from. On maybe there was a reason for it, but I'll give you an example. One of I call it a significant change coming on SOPG is we required a JROTC letter signed if you didn't have a certificate. And so when we peeled back, okay, what's driving this requirement? Again, like Neff said, we have to know where it's coming from in order to change it. And it says written proof. That's it. Doesn't say letter, doesn't say nothing. So why can't we use transcripts? And so how much easier would that be for you guys to be like, okay, now I have a third option of something I can include to increase their rank. Another one that came about is BFM measurements is like, who's driving that? Is it the AFMAM? Is it some sort of AFI that's telling us that a recruiter can't do it? And so we have not found anything to date. So I don't want to sell that that's what's the change coming, but that's something that we're still investigating so that we can put it in there. How much easier would it be for you to do it yourself or have a system in place to where you can use maybe a buddy partner or whatever? Again, it's kind of barriers, self-inflicted barriers that were created many years ago when it maybe wasn't a barrier for us because I recruited during a Great Recession, so everybody was looking for a job. So it was like, how do we slow down the funnel because it's coming too fast? Okay, that makes sense then, but now that the funnel has slowed down, we don't need any of these barriers to keep you from putting people in the Air Force. So, to answer your question, it really just depends on, is it AFRS decision or is it outside the AFRS that's driving the policy?
Yeah, and kind of what Sergeant Taylor said. So we've had a lot of personnel change up here at AFRS, specifically in the operations division. One of our long-standing continuity was Mr. Haygood, and a lot of you probably know Mr. Haygood's name, but he moved on to the Space Force, and he's doing the same thing for them. But he was our continuity. He was our recruiting Bible. If we ever had a question, we went to him. But his interpretation was how we did business. And whenever that continuity left, it left us asking ourselves questions. Why is this way? And we didn't have Mr. Haygood to fall back on. So now we're interpreting things in a different way. And one example is drug use, pre-service drug use. So for those of you who've been around for a while, there used to be a table, right, that listed out all of the drugs and whether it was disqualifying or not based on the number of times that you used it. And it was broken down very, very nicely. And so we knew what pre-service drug use looked like. We knew what it meant. But then they took that table away and we all just kind of kept doing business as is. But then when we got up here, we started questioning that, like, okay, why is the table gone? And what does this mean for AFRS? Why are we still doing drug waivers when the drug waiver paragraph has been deleted? Why do we have a dread when there's no mention of drugs even being disqualifying at this point? And we go and look at the reference documents like the DAFMAN, like it doesn't say that drug use is disqualifying. So what are we doing? Why do we still have squadrons out there disqualifying people for cocaine use when technically, when we really get really nitty gritty into the regulations, it's not disqualifying? And so then we start asking those kind of questions like, hey, headquarters Air Force, do you know that this is this way? They're like, oh yeah, we removed the table because all drugs are disqualifying. We're like, well, that is definitely not how that was interpreted, nor is that written anywhere. So if you want that to be the case, we need to put it in writing. But we took everything out of the SOPG because, like, no, we're not going to hold up this invisible barrier that came from interpretation of someone who was once here. We're going to go by the letter of the law. So whatever the DAFMAN says, we're putting in the SOPG. And so that's why we took away dreads. And there's really no drug waivers either. But that's being looked at closely. There might be changes to come in the future. But more is, again, it's about you guys kind of voicing these things and pointing these things out to us to make us sit here and go, I wonder why this was the way that it was, and should we change it?
Yep, and a little bit of a break really quick. No questions have been asked. And this is kind of like the thing that Senior Master Sergeant Taylor was talking about again, was the communication. I know we have a lot of people in here, and I don't want to speak for Senior Master Sergeant Taylor, but it would be nice to get a couple questions from you all. But I do have a couple more that I was sent. But yeah, it would be nice to get some questions going. I know there's a lot of people who complain that I've seen on Recruiter or other pages. So that's kind of, again, what I'm trying to do is not make this a toxic environment, but a place where we can actually go to learn from. So one of the other questions is, what are some major oversights that you have seen that recruiters have done in the field that you believe need to have a little bit more attention on? So I know that we're talking about standards. Some of these things are already in SOPG. What have you seen that come in from your area?
I would, I'll lead off with one, is I think eligibility. So I got a call from a certain Salesforce person questioning the CC MAPIDs. Do we need to still call it CC MAPIDs? And if we've added gang questions, tattoo questions, credit, like there's just extra boxes to check off outside of CC MAPIDs and things like that. Is so when you're looking at an oversight, and we can even talk about, we've had like 5 erroneous enlistments this year, is that we've had some weird things happen since I've been up here. I'm talking an in-week can for a guy having a tattoo behind his ear. Obviously this is before the new policy, and it's like, well, how did he clear MEPs? How did he clear the recruiter? How did he get to where he's at? And so I feel like that some of the biggest oversight is understanding that, like, you are affecting your life because you're causing more ache and pain if it doesn't work out, because you might have missed a question. But slowing down to do eligibility would be like the biggest thing ever. And you also, because when you essentially miss a step like that, that actually creates bad customer service, despite you maybe doing the best you could throughout the whole process, but you made like a mistake. And so then now it creates like, hey, I don't trust, I'm picking at Sergeant Holt because your camera's on. I don't trust Sergeant Holt because he sent a Marine guy to basic training and he wasn't even supposed to be, he's supposed to be part service. And then now his pay is all jacked up. Now his everything's jacked up. Maybe he has a wife and kid. And sometimes that could spread like wildfire in your zone, over maybe just, again, not intentional. I don't think anybody ever did anything on purpose, but just slowing down during eligibility. Not so much would you make that initial contact, because I agree that like it should be a quick, hey, let me run through some questions, let me get them through the door. And then, because a lot of times, you have to be okay, because I've seen people get upset. Again, I've been in recruiting, I lost count, like 14 years, and I've seen recruiters get upset, like they're lying to me. They told me they weigh 155, they're 165. And it's like, I don't know, what if their scale's off? What if there's so many things? It's just get them in. When they come in the office, don't take their calls over the phone for granted. look them in the face, ask the questions, because you will find over body language what people really mean, and if they're potentially hiding something as you go through everything. And so if my biggest rock on anything is always eligibility, and just slow down. There's no need to rush through it. The sale and eligibility to me are the things you should always slow down for. It's not worth skipping through it.
Yeah, I agree. With the slowing down part, I see a lot of recruiters making a lot of dumb mistakes, and those dumb mistakes carry a lot of weight, and they affect you, like Sergeant Taylor said, and they affect that future airman, especially if you're letting them get down to BMT with those mistakes. A couple of examples, because we had another one this week. We had a trainee, first week of training, tell her MTI, I need a breast pump. And she's demanding a breast pump. She wants to go to medical. She wants to get prescribed a breast pump. She wants to breast pump every hour. And we're like, and the first sergeant's calling me like, why did you send this to me? I'm like, I don't know. Let me investigate. Let me go take a look. And this is the second time this has happened in the last couple of months. And guess what? Both times I go back and I look at that applicant's record, and guess what's on their 2807? Nothing. Is a clean pre-screen. They have never been pregnant. They've never had a child. They've never had any problems ever in their life. And that's a problem. So these recruiters, they need to slow down. They need to ask those questions. They need to be able to critically think and put two and two together. If we have a single mother who needs a dependency eligibility determination, and they have a 1-year-old on their 3010 and on their SF86, you should probably answer yes to the pregnancy question, right? We got to review those things. We got to screen effectively, because that answering yes to that question is what's going to trigger the CMO to say, hey, I see you had a kid a year ago. Are you still breastfeeding? Yes. Okay. Well, you can't go to BMT until you're done lactating, right? That's the rules. That's how it's written out in the ODI. So we didn't give that CMO that chance to screen that person effectively. We're sending the single mother down to BMT, who is now probably going to get kicked out for fraudulent enlistment because they didn't disclose all their medical information on the 2807 because your recruiter didn't ask them appropriately. And then we have this single mother who's trying to provide for her child and is now lost an opportunity at a career in the Air Force. And who knows if she'll be able to come back, because when they do those RE codes down at BMT, a lot of times they mess them up. And it can screw these trainees over for the rest of their lives. They might not ever be able to come back because the recruiter moved too quick and didn't ask the right questions. So fully agree. Just please slow down, do things the right way, get smart on what the right way is. Don't do it the easy way, do it the right way, and it'll all work out at the end and everybody will be taken care of.
All right, and that's pretty much all the questions I had. I know I asked for 30 minutes and I didn't get the 30 minutes. I do appreciate it. But I kind of also want to take a little bit more time and kind of just see a way forward with the RSO team. Like I said, I know Senior Master Sergeant Taylor has been on top of the communication, literally just trying to figure out a way to get a lot of information out. So I think we partnered with the teams, and I know we were just throwing ideas out there. What are some of the ideas that you had for moving forward with communication, so we can kind of see if we can get more people to throw their ideas out on how to better communicate?
So before I answer that question, I want to answer Sergeant Hill's question that came up on the chat. So the RSO hallway, that's what I like to call it. Granted, we do have some bastard children in the basement called trainers, the RSO T. But our whole hallway has split out branches. So EA, our branch is literally like the funnel for pretty much everything that happens in RSO, and that includes OA. So OA actually even splits further down to, so they have their equivalent. Senior Master Sergeant Wallace does the same thing I do, but on the OA side, and then he has Lieutenant Colonel Black, and then they have two sub little offices. One handles HP, the other one handles LO, and then there's two grad flight chiefs that run those offices. Spec Warfare has their own, and then Space Force just stood theirs up about like a little bit over a year ago, where everybody knows Sergeant Zia sends a very, very good communicator, and Lieutenant Colonel Stevenson. There's a few other people in that hallway, but those are the key ones to understand that like every It's all kind of broken down. And then, but SOPG is owned by my offices. Job Bank, which I see Sergeant Madison and Sergeant White on, like they're communicating for Space Force and for spec warfare when it comes to anything BMT related. They're literally, it's Groundhog Day every Monday and Friday. Hey, here's a breakdown of gender. Here's who you're expected to numbers to see this week. Hey, here at the end of the week, here's some the numbers and so forth. But they have to include all the EA numbers, which includes Space Force and spec warfare. And so that's not something I was fully tracking before I came up to the hallway, as I like to call it. But it's kind of important for you guys to know that like there is, it's segmented. But our branch is the one that really touches everyone, because we also have OPM falls under the standards office, which Mr. Figueroa and what's her name? Is it Larco or Miss Larco? Then we also have the physical standards office, which is Major Catrine, Mary Hill, Miss Mary Hill, Sergeant Reyes, who they're essentially liaisons to the SG. And then the other thing, which I did not know until I got up to the hallway again, when I'm on the ground as on goal, I'm just putting, working it. So I don't necessarily pay attention, which is not a good thing. But the other piece that I didn't know happened sometime over the last couple years is that our SG now falls under AFRS. Before they fell under AETC. So that allows better direct contact from General Thomas. So you guys might have seen back in like November where there was a huge response to any pending SG. That was because General Thomas is like, hey, look, I need you guys to put in some extra work, overtime hours, to get caught up on your on the backlog of SGs and so forth. And so that kind of gave a little bit better control to AFRS. So again, I just kind of wanted to share that piece. And again, training somehow fits. We don't know where they truly fit in the whole scheme of AFRS, so they put them under operations, I guess. But I wanted to kind of share that piece so you guys kind of had a kind of understanding of the structure of what RSO looks like at AFRS.
Yeah, and throw this out there. If anybody does have a question, you want to say it and not type it out, speak up. There's probably nothing that you could throw at us that would stump us. But I encourage you guys to, whatever concerns you have, let them fly, and we'll try to provide whatever kind of intel we got on it.
The other piece too is we're trying to going back to kind of like communication, and Sergeant Butler, I'll answer your question here in a minute about that. But we get a lot of weird stuff where we might have a recruiter email OPM asking for a tier eval. Or they'll email analysis, which handles all the data analytics for production and beyond. They get emails on random stuff as well, maybe asking for a med read follow-up from the SG or something like that. And so if just use your chain of commands, because your ops team and your group ops know they should know which offices to contact. And if they don't, then they should be calling the standards office, because we're kind of like, I feel like between Sergeant Neff, Sergeant Franco, myself, we know we can direct you in the right place. And I say that just because we've had some shipper issues that have taken over a day because we hit the wrong offices, and those people don't even know. Hey, I didn't know this is where I needed to go, and we kept asking the wrong people to get the answer to yes, and it literally took over a day to get somebody cleared that could have been done in less than a few hours. So Sergeant Butler, to answer your question on communication, so there's been a lot of ideas on what to do. At first, people thought, hey, what if we do a Q&A every week so we can kind of brief things? Weekly emails, Teams. I didn't see a whole lot of people respond to when I posted a few things on Teams. Thought of Facebook. I don't want to necessarily overwhelm emails. But here's the thing, right? Unfortunately, things have to go. Right now, we're not in the best state in production in the command, and so that actually opens the aperture to change. And so, which it could be a lot of change, right? But I'll be honest, all this change coming it makes too much sense. Like allowing the tattoos beyond here is like we're overdue. Our culture in the United States is people like tattoos. So why would we eliminate somebody who has a talent that has a tattoo right here? BFM standards. Why is ours stricter than some of the other branches? And so increasing that. And so a lot of these things that are coming down are to help you guys. So the question is, how can we better communicate, what that looks like? And I know one of the topics came up was NOTAMs, and I'll quickly even touch up on that. And that was one that we've been kind of toying around. It's like, how do we let you know that a NOTAM's coming, but then what if it doesn't come? Because that's even the thing too, where it's like, hey, this change is blessed, draft a NOTAM, and we're like, ooh, we got this good information, and they're like, oh wait, pause, we're not doing that no more, right? So if we give you guys a heads up, then it gives you guys, oh wait, this is coming. And then kind of like the vaccine, when it got rescinded, granted that one was going to change, we knew that was coming, but we noticed on Facebook people were posting flyers saying, hey, come join, this is rescinded. OSD had not put out their guidance yet, and so we cannot operate without OSD putting out the guidance. Even though it's been blessed on Congress, we cannot move forward without OSD. So there's a lot of red tape that leads to why things are so slow. And so I kind of wanted to share it out there. You guys are on the call. I really love that we've got, I think, was it like 31 people on the call right now, is that please pass this stuff on, because we're just as frustrated as you are. I was just talking to SSgt Neff before the call. It's like, we have a, I'll give you a heads up. There's an ASVAB ETP for DEP, one-time ETP for somebody in DEP. That's, I've never unheard of, but now the appetite for change is coming, right? Why not allow someone to retest? And so right now the NOTAM's not signed yet, because we have to be able to put out the right guidance of what that looks like, so that you guys aren't going through retesting everybody who wants to retest, that there's certain parameters in place that allows appropriate of when you should retest somebody. For example, if they're reserved a job, sorry, you should not allowing them to retest. They're on their way out. They're probably leaving within a week or two. Things like that. But so anyway, I've said a lot. I want to hear from you guys. What would be the best way to communicate, to just let you know, hey, this is what's going on? Is it a matter of, and I know, who's the filmer? Who's the video guy? Is that Sergeant Vergano? Are you the video guy? So maybe it is the Q&A, because you're recording it and putting it on YouTube. A variation of Jody with the Y. He's doing it for recruits. We're doing it now for recruiters, to kind of stay in the know-how of like, hey, this is here's the latest and greatest. So please ask who's got ideas.
So with the SOPG updates, would it be possible to put like a spot in AFRISS, like where it says SOPG spot underneath there, basically like SOPG update recommendations or something? That way it gets sent to you guys.
You're talking about like from the field up?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like how there's, AFRISS updates, like you go on Ricky, you put it in there.
Yep.
Or would it, doing it on Ricky be easier? I don't know who owns which one, so.
I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of Ricky. I don't know what it is. I like one-stop shop, so if we can keep it in AFRISS, I want to keep it in AFRISS.
Yeah.
We could do
to me, put it underneath the SOPG tab makes sense, because you're gonna look at the SOPG anyways, and like if you can update it from there, send in a recommendation, it makes sense. It'd be a lot easier.
Yeah, and just to like piggyback on that, I think we were talking about that when I was down there, starting that. It's kind of like having a Excel spreadsheet or something like that says, hey, these are the suggested updates, and then or ideas, and then also say like, hey, green, yellow, or red, as in like, hey, why won't this update work? I feel like we have a lot of updates that's like, we're not the only ones that think of it. Other people think of it, but now you're getting the same idea 5 different times.
So I know everybody is not a huge fan of Teams. I actually love Teams. I used it for senior NCOA. I went through during COVID, and so I was kind of forced to use it. And at first I was like, what is all this channels and so forth, for my non-tech brain. But it does really work. So I kind of wonder if maybe on the recruiter to recruiter page, there's a channel that says SOPG recommendations, and there's an Excel sheet in there, and then we can use that. Because one of the things I've been toying around, I don't know if she's on, and I chop names up all the time. Master and Farah, or she's from 38. Ashley, I know her first name's Ashley. She mentioned something about RSO having better, I think she was suggesting with helping QC, like I think the stuff that you guys dump in there to share, and so forth. And I don't know that we can necessarily do that because I don't know how much information's in there, and we're very, very minimally manned up. I won't say minimally manned. I don't think we're manned enough for the current environment. But I would like, and I've talked to Sergeant Neff about this. You guys have seen him post all over Facebook too, of like us at least being in there to kind of help. Like, so if you're giving us like I think I created an RSO channel in there. There's a folder in there for not AFRISS, but SOPG recommendations, and that way you can, like, so for example, if Sergeant Holt logs in, he could be like, oh, Sergeant Turner already requested this, I don't need to, and then we can kind of use that as kind of keeping track of ideas. The only thing though with the way it was set up before is that, yes, we would I would say appreciate a vetting process, only because there may be things that be like, oh, let me actually show you where it says it in here or so forth. But to be fair, I'm at the point where I don't want to slow down communications, that I'm open to just saying, hey, throw it in there and we can try to, we'll take turns tracking it to see if it'll work into any SOPG edit, or at least provide feedback as to why it's not gonna go through or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want anybody feeling like they can't, like their voice won't be heard. I definitely want to make sure that you guys, if you have a concern or a question, that it is answered in some way. And I felt those frustrations as a recruiter. I felt like a lot of things got stuck at the group. And then I come up here and I frustrate because I feel like a lot of things get stuck at the group. But now I'm in a position where I can try to change that, and I'm not trying to throw too much heat at the groups, but it is a lot sometimes. So it is good to ask your flight chief, get your flight chief's opinion on the matter. Maybe they have the answer that you're looking for, or maybe you bringing up that question or concern gets them invested in the problem the way that you need them to be invested, and they can get their ops chief to be invested, and so on and so forth. Because the more that we're invested into these issues, the more that we can help each other out.
Sir Neff, is it possible for us to throw that matrix on there and we could just try it and see how it goes? Saying, hey, if there's SOPG recommendations, and like I said, I took an IT like class, but it's like IT related to HR kind of thing. So it briefly covers, like, not getting into the weeds of it, but one of the things that really stood out to me, this was like back in when we first got into COVID, where I had a little bit of time to do some classes towards my bachelor's, and it referenced, I think it was Red Robin, and they put out some new like recipes for like burgers and something or other. And so like they have some kind of like quick way to where you can go on something really kind of similar to, I think it was called, like, I don't know, it was some like spin on the word Twitter or something like that. And so when people post on there and they saw a lot of restaurants saying this recipe needs some tweaking, they were able to change the recipe really quick to be a better output for the customers. And so I'm not opposed to, like I said, we can try it out and see what happens. Of like, hey, let's just put it out there and see. You guys are essentially our customers. You guys are the ones screening people. What does this paragraph even make sense? And it needs to be redefined, or why is this not even in here? Or why is this even in here? Poking holes through it. So I know that we did a hell of a revamp on it of what you're going to see, but I'm pretty sure we didn't cover everything. So yeah, if we can throw that matrix in there and just test it out and see if we actually get anybody putting stuff in there.
Yeah, I'll definitely put it on Teams. Back to Sergeant Griffin's original request, AFRISS is really limited on what it can do. All it is a data maintenance base. It can't do a whole lot. So having like a live document that people from all over could update, and we go in and see like each update each time, I don't think AFRISS could pull that off. But Teams is built for that kind of thing. The only thing with Teams is you got to be added to the channels, and it's got to be maintaining things like that. But I think Teams is probably our best bet to get the voice of the masses together.
Yeah, I can build you guys a folder in there so you guys can update it. So,
all right. So from Sergeant Holt, thank you, Sergeant Holt, for your question. I appreciate you. What worked best for the Tier 2 plus recruiters? School visits, marketing, different processes, community outreach. What helped them most during their time as a Tier 1? Like, what would you think was the key to success looking back? For me, since I'm already talking, it's strange because I've been asked this question a lot, especially since I've been up here. And I don't know if it was necessarily just one thing specifically. My schools weren't very friendly. I was barely allowed to do school visits no matter how hard I tried. Marketing events, no matter what I did, they just didn't have the bang that I wanted. But our flight was extremely successful because of our attitude. And I really think that was why we came out on top. I mean, we hustled. We were always hungry. We never let anybody slip through the cracks if we could help it. And if someone around us let somebody slip the cracks, we were there to catch them and bring them over to our team. I mean, we did not give up. And that was before COVID. That was during COVID. That was after COVID started to slow down. I mean, I remember even during COVID, we were told like, hey, guys, slow down, no processing, take some time with your families and so on and so forth. We didn't stop. We got on Google My Business. We made sure that anybody who ever looked us up could find us. We answered every single phone call. We set up virtual appointments with everybody. And when MEPs opened up, we filled them with all the people that we've been building during that time. We did not slow down. And I think that would be my biggest advice for all my tier 1 recruiters out there is it really comes down to attitude. I know it's kind of cheesy and we say at the schoolhouse, attitude is everything, but it really, really is. I saw an email from a senior leader in recruiting, and they talked about, the culture of AFRS and this bystander effect that we're all kind of experiencing. And I know a lot of you guys are struggling right now. And I know it's tough out there. But are you going to be a bystander, or are you going to do something about it? Are you going to make yourself smart? Are you going to hustle? Are you going to keep fighting no matter how hard it is or how much you're failing or everybody else is failing around you? What are you going to do to get out of it? So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
This might upset some of y'all. So I had only 2 P1 schools. I think I had a P2 and a P3. And my flight chief found a way to delete the P2. And then it would still pop up every now and then. But I only visited 2. I had 2 high schools to visit. And then I eventually got a 3rd. And that school, when they opened, they called me immediately. And to be honest, because I didn't have that many schools, I wanted to visit them more than once. But they were my bread and butter. I could put in 5 people each from each one of my high schools. And so I even, whenever I got bumped out of my seat for humanitarian, and I was on my way out anyways. So around the time I got bumped out, like 2 weeks later, I had an assignment because I was due. And so I went and took that guy to my last high school. And I was like, you know what? I didn't do a JRTC visit. And I literally scrubbed through, like, why didn't I do a JRTC visit? And again, this is my last year, right? I didn't need to. I had established myself over the years that the English teachers were calling me. I talked to, they had some kind of like beta engineering course that I did actually had a guest speaker on, but I was there to, I'm telling you, if you can get guest speakers to do your classroom presentations, it is freaking goldmine, because all you're there to do is provide, then let me tell you about what it takes to join Air Force. And then you may talk a little bit on benefits, but that other person just sold for you, AKA rappers. My second best rep presentation was 3 rappers. One joined as a senior, one joined with an associate's, one joined as, oh crap, I've graduated high school, what do I do in my life? And so I had each 3 tell their story as to why they joined. And it took up more than half the class. I basically facilitated it. And I probably pulled the most people out of any classroom presentation with testimonials of a recruiter not really talking. And so I say that to say, I know a lot of people feel like some of the things we have in place may be antiquated. It may be, hey, it worked back then. It is a new era. My kid, I've talked to my kid though. I had, I think it was when we were doing SOPG rewrite or something. I can't remember what it was. And she was saying like, oh, the e-recruiters. Have you guys heard about e-recruiters? So basically, we have a pilot team right now where they're helping with some of your leads throughout the nation. And if they're working, if they can work them, they'll work them pretty much and hand them off to you, and so forth. And so I think it could work. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I feel like there's nothing takes away from a face-to-face of like, and that's why like I'm enjoying seeing some of the faces that are on right now. But I asked my kid, who's a 16-year-old junior in high school, and she said, no, I'd rather go talk to a recruiter in person. And so I was like, so you think, and I've actually had ops chief tell me this, like, why aren't we using optimizer? Why aren't we doing this, doing that? The kids these days want this. And I'm like, but do they? Because I know my kid talked to, anyone know Matt Davis? He's a OA recruiter out in LA. So I asked him to do me a favor. I said, hey, my kid's 14, but she's going to start probably looking for jobs sometime in the near future. She's going to be 15 soon. Let's get a mock interview out of the way, even though it's Air Force. She walked out wanting to join Air Force. And I asked her, I was like, why? And Matt Davis won't tell you about it, but he's a gold badge blue suitor, top recruiter, and just freaking killed it. She's like, because he talked to me like he was very personable, and he cared like to hear about me and know me and get to and all this stuff. And I was just like, huh, it does work. So when I've heard recruiters say, don't treat your applicant like a number, and I know it's hard because some of us are introverts and don't like people. I've heard that comment from quite a few people, but it's really just being personable. Get out in your zone. You don't have to do it exactly like what worked for me may not work for you. I loved classroom presentations. As the flight chief, I try to make all my recruiters do classroom presentations. And one of my best recruiters didn't do classroom presentations. She went into her school, shot the shit with all her counselors, and she would still pull like 4 people. And I'm talking, she always had the most soft books the every year. And so I had to learn, like, let me step back. She's doing her school visits. It's not what I would want her to do, but she's still meeting the intent. The bottom line of a school visit is, are you coming out with a tangible lead that can produce to a potential PIR and beyond? And so I had to step back and be like, okay, that works for her. And so again, just get out in your zones, be personable, be a human being. I think that's what helps me even today to be a senior, is that a lot of people, I would think like me, because I'm going to be personable with you and don't mind. Like Sergeant Butler called me yesterday and he was like kind of a little nervous. I'm gonna call you out. But I was like, no, I'm glad you called. I'm glad that we met, that you felt comfortable enough to call me so that I can be on today's call, so that I can pass information on to you guys. The e-recruiter leads, they're literally an AFRS.
I can elaborate on it.
Okay.
So it's they take 30, it's either 30 or 60 LRC leads that have already been refined by the LRC, 30 to 60 a day, and they get them MEPs ready for you. All right. So they're going to make contact with that individual. They're going to set up their AFSCep account. They're going to send them all the initial enlistment documents through AFSCep, get them all signed. They're going to sign on the recruiter portions. They're going to get them the PICAT to take the PICAT. They're going to have them gather whatever med docs they need, source docs, whatever, all that stuff that you do in the beginning, usually typically an initial appointment. So that way, whenever they pass them to you and transfer them to your flight chief, they are ready for MEPs, whether it be a MEPs projection, a pre-screen submission, or an ASVAB test. So hopefully that's successful for you all. As you guys are getting those leads, I would encourage you to ask them the question, like, how's your experience with the e-recruiter? And then let your leadership know if that's effective or not, because that's one thing I'm really, really curious about, is what is that handoff going to look like exactly? Starting with one person, moving to another. I mean, personally, the initial appointment, the initial contact was everything for me, because that's where I established that relationship. And for me, it's kind of weird starting in the middle, but I know it's going to take a lot off your plate. So I'm curious to see what you guys think.
Neff, I have a cool question. It's Hill.
Ahead,
if that goes well, is there any talk about that coming to the OA side? Because I know our applicants, that their processing is a little more complicated as far as document wise than an EA applicant.
I don't think OA is just on the discussion board right now, because right now I think they're still only going to be looking at like active duty, and then they want to slowly expand into total force, and then maybe go into officer sessions. But I think that's kind of far away right now. They're literally just getting started.
Okay. Yeah, this is the first I've heard of it.
One of the snafus that I'll be the first to admit is, like, for example, when I created my team for the SOPG, I was very, very particular. Sergeant Butler, actually, I'll pick on you again. I wasn't getting the tier 1 representation I needed for the meeting. And I called, Senior Tench called me for something. And I was like, you know what? Do you have a tier 1 recruiter you can send me next week that can make it? And Sergeant Butler was ever to come. But in the SOPG room, I had somebody from the schoolhouse, I had somebody from IG, I had somebody from AFRISS, Salesforce. On top of, there was 3 graduated pro students, myself, Johnson, and Foreman. We had a fair share of flight chiefs, and trying to think who else. I think that was it. But that pretty much covered like all our basis on, and I had we would actually brief Sergeant Boudrum, who's at the Pentagon, when we were done with the SOPG to make sure it jived with whatever they got going on up there. And so I say that to say that when they were getting ready to roll out the e-recruiters, they were looking for it to be total force, and they ran into huge snafus of like, wait, in AFRS, it doesn't jive because there's just so many complex ways this can go. And so I was in that meeting and I was like, oh, wow. Like they were about to kick this off here in about a week and a half. And they had to make that quick adjustment to realize like, we can only do this for active duty right now because of the AFRISS capabilities. So AFRISS, I know that the Salesforce team is working hard to eliminate the red tape that AFRISS creates, because if the president says recruiting will do this today, unfortunately, AFRISS is going to tell us, sorry, wait, it's going to be June. Right now, the backlog is June for anything new to get published. I mean, I'm sure we could probably get chopped up. So if it gets chopped up in front of the line, it's going to be April. Still not soon enough for something implemented today. And I know that that is your number one frustration, because it was surely mine, of why is there such a delay in AFRISS for things to happen. So any other questions out there?
Do we want to throw some things out that are on the docket right now, coming changes that we're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, let's do it.
So one big thing that we're on the final stretch with is the ECLRP, so Enlisted College Loan Repayment Program. It's been offline for a long time. So it's going to be a steep learning curve for a lot of people. There's probably some flight chiefs who haven't seen it, maybe some graduated flight chiefs who haven't seen it. But before it was a $10,000 repayment on your student loans. Now it's going up to 65,000, I want to say, so significantly higher. Another good selling point for you guys. We're just waiting for the policy to get kind of polished up on that. We're trying to get it out today. I don't know if it's going to happen. Driver's license.
Go on to the next.
Go ahead.
When that does come out, I have to really foot stomp, and please share it with anybody you know. Read the parameters. There is a lot. It is a very, very complex program. When I was a tier 1 recruiter, my flight chief basically said, don't even bother trying to sell anybody to do it because it's so complicated to do. And so I never did when it was available. It was only 10 grand, but there's a lot of things, like they have to be in good standing with their student loan. And there's a lot of parameters that are involved with it. It's a great help to sell people, but again, parameters that you don't want to sell something that be like, oh, wait a minute, you don't qualify for this. So make sure you read up on it whenever it does get rolled out.
Yeah, another big ones that I think will help you guys out is driver's license. So we previously had 36 AFSCs that required a driver's license upon arriving at basic training. They've chopped that down to 7, and they're working on chopping down that 7 even more. And they're trying to come up with like programs where you join the Air Force and you go to a driving school, things like that. And to kind of caveat on that, so there is a team right now called like a CFT Sprint, and it's comprised of a couple people from AFRS leadership, AFPC, headquarters Air Force, and it's all being led by this Office of the Secretary of the Air Force. And it's about reducing barriers in recruiting. And I hear a lot of times from recruiters like they're frustrated because they feel leadership doesn't care. If you could sit in on one of these meetings, which we have every Tuesday and Thursday for like the last couple months, you would see that that's not true. Everybody cares so much about recruiting right now. And it is such an awesome time for AFRS because all these changes that we've been sitting on for such a long time and all these new ideas, it's going in the hopper and it's coming out almost immediately because the vice chief of staff is saying, go do, and do it now. Like, do not wait. Do not let the bureaucracy of the process slow this thing down. And so it's a very, very fast moving train, but it's couldn't be a better time to join the Air Force, honestly. There's so many benefits coming out. We got jobs left and right for applicants to choose from. I mean, you guys should be really, really happy that people care as much as they do right now. So driver's license, what are some other big ones, Sergeant Taylor? The ASVAB retest policy, the tattoo thing just came out. Naturalization at BMT, they're trying to make it easier for non-US citizens to get naturalized at BMT instead of having to wait. So we're trying to expand on that as much as we can. There's talk
I do want to throw, it's not a change, but I want to throw something out there. Not that, please don't flood the gates with this either. So listen clearly. ETPs for jobs. We get quite a few. And it's like, what are you, like, we can't ETP this. So like, we'll ask, we're hurting for numbers. The CFM, they'd rather hurt for numbers than not get the talent they need for it. But a successful one that we were able to push forward and approve was somebody for 1B, which is that new job that came out this FY, and it's been going what is that? I can't remember the job title. Sorry, Neff, what's the job title?
Cyber Defense Operations is the 1 Bravo 4 that's been gone for a long time. It just came back this year. It's probably one of the best career fields in the Air Force. And I think I've only maybe assessed like 2 out of the 20 something that we were required to fill. So it's bad. And we need to fill those slots, and they should be the first to go, honestly.
Yeah. It's basically being a hacker. So we get a lot of people that walk in the door that want to be cyber. And I would definitely, we're trying to work through this. I got a few people on my team that we're trying to figure out what's a better way to highlight some of these jobs that we may not, that 1B, I guarantee you, is buried amongst those mechanic jobs, which, don't get me wrong, we need to fill. But any job that we can fill at this point, let's do it, right? But the ETP that just came through, he met the ASVAB scores, but the EDPT did not. He missed it by 7 points. He provided a Google certification that he did where he went through some course through them on, I think it was like some sort of data analytics, but then he also went to coding school, which my husband's going to coding school right now. So where that's a huge deal in the outside, that's why he went. He has a master's, but he's like, I want to go to this coding school because I know it'll get me a job. We sent those certificates up to the CFM, like, I'm talking within hours, was like, yes, I want this guy in our career field. And so as you guys are going through talking to applicants, and you see, like, for example, if they have like certifications or nationally registered and different things, like whatever job it is, like firefighters or whatever, like push that up. If they, and I say that more on the side, if they miss like by one, like if they miss firefighter job by, which hopefully not because it's a low G score, but if they miss the ASVAB score, but they have fire certificates, like send that up. I guarantee you that CFM is likely to be like, yes, we know he's a guaranteed, he's got the talent to go be a firefighter. And a lot of people don't think about that. The key is like, you're not just sending up, hey, I know you need a cop, let them through. It's like, no, we need substantial like evidence that shows, and it's basically any kind of certifications, and route them through your group ops to standards. And if you get pushback on it, I am the only SMSgt Taylor on the global. So don't be afraid to reach out, because we're in dear need to meet mission, and we don't need any roadblocks out there from trying to, get everybody that we can get.
Yeah, easy way to remember it. An exception to policy is for the exceptional, right? What makes that individual exceptional? If you're just asking for something to meet a number, you're not asking for an ETP, you're asking for a change to standards. And changing standards is a lot harder, especially with these CFMs. They don't want to change standards. But if we send them something exceptional, they will give us an exception to policy.
And the other point of exception is being homeless is not an exception. We get it all the time, like on a shipper. Hey, they quit their job. They got this. They already sold their lease. It's like, that's every shipper. I would hope that that's what they did. And it unfortunately just doesn't, it doesn't carry any weight despite us wanting to take care of that person. So, Sergeant Turner, I see you put in here, you have a question.
There we go. Sorry, I'm driving. Sorry I didn't text, but So this is more geared towards the MEPs and operations side of the house, but because we are those that QC for tier 1 and flight sheets to make sure applicants are eligible, with the huge influx of changes, between remote dep, con dep, tattoos approval, DAT waivers, there's so many changes on a MEP side of the house. We're seeing more BMT errors. We're seeing more erroneous enlistment. I know every squadron has a training section, but they're really more focused on EA and production, rightfully so. I don't know if they're really gauging how much training MEPs and liaisons are lacking as well. Is there any eyes on that, or is there anything in the works as far as ensuring MEPs has proper understanding of what their options are with applicants and how to properly steer them through all these different options?
So actually, I was making a note on something that I wanted to talk about before I got off, and I know like we're over time, so I'm Butler, but I feel like there's just a lot of information to put out there. Something, and I don't know who's on the chatter. Sergeant Neff brought it to my attention on there's like MEPs group chats out there and so forth. So I am pushing really hard. I can't promise 100%, but let's go with 98% chance of there being a MEPs Ops conference this summer. I am tracking. So when I went to annuals this past fall, I made a point to meet with all my ops and MEPs because again, I'm the ops chief for AFRS. And so tell me what's going on. And in those meetings, I was able to eliminate that Excel product that was the additional qualifications because it was an AFRISS. Why were we updating the Excel sheet in AFRS? And then because we're having to keep track of two, sometimes they don't match. And then that causes further potential CAN issues and so forth. And so I've got Colonel Turner, Chief Rawls, and Mr. Traders on board. I just need to get like I gotta put some numbers together on what that cost would look like. The idea would be to have one MEPs, one ops from each squadron. When I say one MEPs, I mean one MEPs per MEPs, not one MEPs per squadron, if that makes sense. So like if a squadron has 3 MEPs, I should have 3 MEPs people going. Again, it all depends. I don't want to cause mission stoppage. But the key is that marketing does this once a year. Why can't ops MEPs do it? You guys are what polices and ensures, like you said, Sergeant Turner, on what gets to BMT and helps the field with whatever it may be. And so again, I'm trying to shoot for either end of June, early July, so that we can at least, if maybe you're not getting trained by your tier 2, because to be honest, Sergeant Turner, your tier 2, that's likely their first tier 2, and they've never done ops MEPs. There's nothing they can really train you on. It would maybe be on whether or not that senior trainer ops chief to provide that training, and sometimes it's just not there. So we know it's a deficit, and so I at least on our end want to do that conference where even be able to walk you guys through BMT reception so you can kind of see like, hey, this is why the 93 is important. These people, this is what they're reviewing from all the documents and so forth. So again, more to come on that, but yes, that is a huge issue. And my biggest concern is, again, we have a ton of changes coming, and you guys are on the forefront of trying to keep up with the changes so that you don't catch an erroneous with everything going on.
Yeah, Sergeant Turner, mic drop on your question. Seriously, I'm a big believer in demanding feedback, and if you are not seeing your trainers enough or in the right capacity, demand them. Make them come out to that MEPS. Make them show you what all is going on. Because I can tell you in my time up here, I've never once talked to a trainer, ever. I've always talked to ops, and ops is always the one doing the training for MEPs. So get your people invested. That's what I said earlier. Get your training people invested on the mission, invested on what you guys got going on in ops and MEPs. Get everybody on the same page. That's how we win.
I do want to tag along with what you just said there. I think one of the problems that some people have is they don't know where to go. So with what you just said, how would you suggest a tier 1 that doesn't even know that they can reach out? How would you be able to teach them, right? I know we always say flight chief, but what happens if the flight chief, they're human. So what happens when there's a human problem with them? How are we getting to our tier 1 recruiters? Sorry about that one.
I think it comes back to demanding feedback. If your flight chief isn't present, and yeah, what Chief Cohen is saying, I'm gonna ramp up to that. Demand feedback. If the flight chief isn't there, go talk to ops, go talk to training. If you're still not getting the answer, go talk to the pro soup. Nobody should feel bad. If they're not giving you the feedback that you need, keep going up. And if your senior enlisted leader isn't giving you feedback, well, that's a bigger problem, but they should definitely be able to help you. I mean, they have all the expertise you could probably ever want, way more than probably what we have here in RSO. You'll get your answers somewhere. You just got to keep fighting for it.
Yeah, and I would also say, and I know that it's hard, again, like our conversation yesterday, you felt like, man, I feel like I just skipped a bunch of layers calling you directly to do this call. But I feel like it's on a different, capacity, to be honest. It's not, you're not asking me, hey, can you nudge this waiver for me from Colonel Turner or something? You know what I'm saying? Because that I will say layer. Right. But in this capacity, one of the things that I think scares me the most, and I'll even use like the Women's Symposium on why that was so valuable to me last week, is that it's just another form of connection, is that encourage your peers to get on these social websites or whatever you want to call them. I said websites, I'm old. And use that as maybe not so much as, hey, they got to go in there and post, but maybe they could see somebody like Chief Cohn, myself, Sergeant Neff. I know there's a long list, like Chief Lynch just posted the other day on somebody else's ideas of like, you can actually just go in there and message them and say, hey, I'm just wanting to pick your brain on, I need some help. I need some thoughts of some training and so forth. If all else fails, because the shirt chief pro suit should be the backup for anywhere. If your flight chief's not necessarily all there in, there's a way of tactfully approaching it with using any of those three people that I just mentioned to fight for that feedback that Neff mentioned so that you can get the adequate training.
I know some people come from career fields where it's very a toxic environment sometimes. So to come over here, it felt like, sometimes you couldn't reach out. And I will say, ever since I started like picking the brains of different people, definitely got a lot of good ideas. A lot of help has been out there. And I will say it definitely helped me out there in recruiting, not only like mentally, but also like with my numbers as well. So definitely, you guys are all there in positions for a reason. So I do appreciate everything that you guys have done. So I don't want to end it yet. I know I'm not trying to rush you guys off the Zoom either. So if there's anything else you all had, sorry, I'm getting.
I'll leave on two notes actually. Chief Hamilton's on. He's our CFM and he gave a huge shout out. I wholeheartedly agree. Sergeant Butler told me what this was about, a vision between using Sergeant Griffin, Sergeant Vergano, and I think you gave me a fourth name, I don't remember, but I can try to push culture change. So can some flight chiefs and other pro soups and chiefs, but it's really going to be on you guys on the tier 1 to rally and fight against. My commander, I was pro soup during COVID, started March 2020, and he was in place. And the best way to kind of analyze everything was like, China's still coming for us, right? And so we cannot fail. Like our adversary is like China. To me, when I see us missing mission every week, because I track the numbers, I'm like, China's winning still. And it's not saying they're like in our Kool-Aid causing it, but that's our fight to the mission, is putting the bodies in. And so if we don't turn this ship around, it's going to be the change agents from the people actually putting people in, like yourselves. And so I know you didn't get a whole ton of people on the call. I mean, we got like over 1,200 recruiters out there, but everything matters. And hopefully that's why I keep saying spread what you're hearing today, because that's the only way we're going to get out of it, is by cross talking and figuring out how we can eliminate barriers and get to where we need to be as a recruiting force. So, and the last thing I'll say is SOPG rewrite. There's a lot of significant changes coming. I don't know if maybe Sergeant Vergano can help me with this endeavor. But Sergeant Butler, whenever I gave the rundown of, I briefed Chief Rawls, like, hey, this is everything we're looking to do. He was like, hey, you explained that really well. It made sense to me, and which I think means a lot, because how can I, so then it's like, if I push this SOPG out, how can I make sure it makes sense to everybody? And so my thought is like, if I can do like a tutorial by chapter, so that way you could be like, hey, I want to look at chapter 3 and what the updates are. You can turn, granted, I don't want to freaking do it, but I'll do it only because Sergeant Butler has faith in me. To do it by chapters, because the biggest thing you'll find that with the rewrite is that we restructured it. You'll find that your responsibilities as a recruiter are spread out throughout the whole thing. So how do you know what you're supposed to do when it's like sprinkled through so many chapters? And so a lot of things got funneled up to the front, which is chapter 2, roles and responsibilities. And so it'll be a lot more clear to whoever, whatever position you're in, on what you should, what your roles are. And then also, like, again, being able to kind of share, there's a minor change on how we'll do things coming. I say it's minor, is where we'll start some of we'll start recruit management once they promote to PIRR. And basically having them come into our DEP calls earlier on. And I'll be honest, I use that to my advantage. I don't know if I want to say I'm lazy, but if I don't have to do something and I can have the masses do it together. So if they're in these DEP calls and there's like 5 jokers that are like trying to get meta reads through, they can crosstalk, hey, let me tell you how I got my meta read through. And then you'll find that like people are like motivated together, like, hey, I'm not the only one that's stuck in this Genesis process. And you'll find that your applicants will stay committed a lot sooner. Having done a medical CPI with MEPCOM and had all the branches come in, we pulled some timelines. The timelines hadn't changed. It's still from like, I can't remember, I think it's like 78 days or something, or maybe longer. I'd have to pull it up. But let's say the timeline's this. So before it was PRR this time, DEP in this time frame. The difference is the timelines are the same. The difference is they're in PIR this long and they're maybe in depth this long. So we're not doing anything to develop them for basic training. If anything, maybe we're not even having time to QC their paperwork between DEP and ship day. And so with starting it at PIR, it helps kind of stabilize back to where we were when we were actually providing better development to our recruits before they left for basic training. And so AFRISS will reflect some of a lot of those changes and restructuring folders so that it makes better sense on when forms are due during the process in AFRISS, which again, it will come mid-April. So for example, when you do an appointment, you're only required to do like maybe 4 forms, not 10. And so you'll have an appointment folder. You'll have what forms should be done before processing. And those forms won't stop you from scheduling somebody like they do now. I'm pretty sure like if you don't have a 2030, you can't schedule them. That requirement will get removed. They're still required to process, but not required to schedule. And again, just kind of eliminating some barriers that created why applicants or recruiters feel like I need to do all these forms up front because I want to be ready to schedule them. I didn't need that to schedule somebody when I was on the bag. I could fast track the hell out of anybody, but I don't have the same barriers you guys have. And it's like, why do I need all these forms just to schedule them? I would do all the forms on my MEPS brief and everything was solid on MEPS brief because that was my undivided attention to go over all these forms and make sure they were good to go for processing. So anyway, just some insight on some of the things you'll be seeing on this SOPG rollout here in the next week or two. That is all I have. Thank you for Sergeant Butler and the rest of the RARA team on inviting Sergeant Neff. Sergeant Neff, I don't know if you have any final words. Thank you.
Yeah, I might be taking some of Sergeant Butler's thunder, but I just want to say thank you, Sergeant Butler, to you and your team for putting this together. This is so important. Thank you to Chief Cohen, Chief Hamilton for coming out and showing some top cover. You being here is proof that leadership cares. And thank you to all the recruiters who came on and was willing to listen and learn.
Yeah, thank you again. I'm new to this, so always feedback is always appreciated. Again, I didn't see this when I was my first 2 years here, so I wanted to start this. And like Senior Master Sergeant Taylor said, not a lot of people. There's 30 people here with over 1,200 recruiters. However, thanks to Sergeant Regano, we're going to be able to capture little bits and pieces of this and have like the chapters, so that way people can just like be able to YouTube or have a link to where they can just get some quick updates, some quick feedback. Like somebody might not know what RSO is, and now they can just go to like a YouTube video and see it and meet the people who are there right now. And back to the SOPG guidance. Hopefully, Sergeant Regano can help with that one too, because it'd be so nice to be on the road sometimes where we have all these window hours, and it'd be nice just to be able to click on a chapter and be able to listen to how it's broken down. And that way, when we get back to the office, we can instantly apply it. So again, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to break out into another quick segment of this video. So you guys don't have to be here for that part. But again, I do appreciate all the time that you guys took out for today.